This weekend, America lost one of the most influential and respected justices to ever sit on the Supreme Court. Antonin Scalia spent 3 decades defending liberty and the Constitution on the high bench. His body has been flown back to Virginia. Funeral plans have not yet been announced. His death has now triggered a monumental election-year battle between Congress and a president in his final year in office. The Senate's Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says the American people should have a voice in who should fill the vacancy by letting the next president decide. But President Obama says he intends to nominate a justice after the Senate returns from recess. Scalia was the leading conservative voice on the bench. His passing could drastically alter the balance of power on the court. In 2012, the justice himself spoke to Fox News about who would one day succeed him, and he had this wish.
I would not like to be replaced by someone who immediately sets about undoing everything that I've tried to do for 25 years, 26 years. Sure. But, I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you that. Unless you think I'm a fool.
Always witty, always brilliant, Eric. Truly a monumental loss for this country, one of the greatest legal scholars in the world.
And a monumental loss for the conservative movement. The guy was by the book. And also on a personal note, before we get into the politics, what a great man, too. KG, you and I had the honor to meet him a couple of times at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And I'll tell you what he would do. He would talk to you. There are people who will talk to you and spend time with you because they have to. When Antonin Scalia talked to you, shook your hand, he listened to you. And that's amazing. It didn't matter if you were on TV or if there's someone he bumped into in the hallway. When you got his attention, you got his attention. He was
fully engaged.
Fully engaged. Great guy that way. Textualist, meaning he interpreted the Constitution for the word that was written, not in sort of living, breathing Constitution that a lot of liberals want to do now. President Obama likes to use the pen, the executive power, to go around some of the things that are written in the Constitution. And what Antonin Scalia did was made sure that the 5-4 majority interpreted the Constitution by the word, which is what we hope will happen going forward.
All right, talk a little bit about the political piece as well, because now there's big statements saying that President Obama is going to make a nomination regardless, and tremendous instant pushback from the right and conservative movement saying that's not appropriate.
Politics, here it is. So Republicans have the risk of looking like obstructionists if they do what Ted Cruz said, where we're going to filibuster and we're going to turn down anyone that they put up. The smarter thing, in my opinion, would be to take whoever President Obama decides to nominate and take your time with it. And take your time with it. And if it's not the right person, don't put him in there. Remember, if you're perceived as obstructionists, as Republicans, President Obama gets an appointment now, and then a Democrat president will likely get the next appointment if Ruth Bader Ginsburg steps aside at some point. So you have to be careful how you play it politically.
You certainly do. Greg, your reflections.
Well, this whole, the way this unfolded is a testament to the state of our country. Before this great man had gone cold, the politics had already unfurled like a noxious gas. I mean, it really is amazing how quickly it happened, and both sides are guilty in this regard. I think that this is one of the most important battles for Republicans and for conservatives. Unfortunately, it is also a boring battle for America. America does not pay attention to these things. They get a lot of their legal advice from the good wife. They don't follow this stuff. They don't realize how important this is. And I think that for the Republicans, look, it's inevitable that President Obama is going to nominate somebody, because that's exactly what you would do. Telling him he can't is like telling a boxer not to hit you in the face. This is he's going to do it. So the question is, how can you be persuasive? What we've learned is that if you're a Republican and you nominate somebody, you're going to get borked. But if you're a Democrat and you nominate somebody, if somebody is critical of you, you are accused of smearing that person, of being a bully. So you have to learn to be persuasively correct. You need to be able to marshal the facts and engage in these hearings so you don't come off bad, but you're able to expose whether this is an ideologue, a left-wing ideologue.
Megan.
Yeah, I mean, just going off on that point, I read this quote earlier today. Chuck Schumer in 2007 said that if any new Supreme Court vacancies opened up, Democrats should only allow Bush to fill it except in extreme circumstances. So in 2007, when it's under Bush, it's okay. But under President Obama, they think they should nominate someone new and it should go through. Just timing-wise, does President Obama have this amount of time? From what I understand, it takes 3 months to look into the background checks and then 3 months of hearings. President Obama doesn't have this much time left. I actually think this will change the stakes in this election ultimately. And I hope people are actually paying more attention than you're saying. I think having the leading conservative voice and defender of conservatism on the Supreme Court passing in this way actually will change the tide in a lot of ways.
Yes, he's so powerful, a tour de force on the bench, and just, to read his opinions, especially, being a lawyer, a prosecutor, and getting so much insight and valuable knowledge just from the way he drafted his opinions and the amount of time that he put into them. And also, he was incredibly well respected by those that he served on the bench with, and many have come out and made those statements.
Oh, sure. I mean, he's good buddies with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is his ideological opponent, someone from the left, and they famously would spend New Year's Eve, I think it was, together. But also, I mean, he's the kind of guy, when Elena Kagan came on the court, he took her skeet shooting. So, I mean, he's the kind of person you get along with. Let me tell you, he's a devout Christian, real family guy, father of 9. I think he had 28 grandchildren. And he loved his sons. I mean,
a son who was a priest. He was a St. Joseph's Catholic Church.
And he's got other sons who are in the legal profession. So he's not only, not only would you say from the conservative point of view that he's an icon, but you would say it from the perspective of people who knew him that he was a lovable guy and he was a good man. I think if you look back at the history on the court, the key thing for me is that he changed the way people discuss the law at the Supreme Court. Not necessarily through coalition building, Kimberly, because he wasn't much on building even with other conservatives. He oftentimes was at odds with, like, Sandra Day O'Connor or Justice Kennedy, especially when it came to things like affirmative action, abortion. He always thought that women don't have a right to have an abortion. There's no right in the Constitution. And he lost that with his fellow conservatives. That's why we still have Roe v. Wade. But the one big case he won and wrote was Heller, which is the gun rights case out of D.C., and I think he leaves a legacy there. But as I was saying, suddenly people all discuss the law and the Supreme Court's rulings in terms of the intent of the founders, what was written in the Constitution. That's where we come back to Eric's point about originalism and strict construction. And that's why Ronald Reagan and Ed Meese put him on the court. That's what they said at the time. We're sick of the Warren Court and the liberal activist judges who create rights for either in terms of civil rights or women's rights or gay rights. I mean, Scalia, maybe also because of the religious thing, was dismissive of the idea of gay rights. He said that was the gay agenda being perpetrated by a law culture in this country that just adopted gay rights and invented the rights. I don't agree with him, but that's what the man said.
Well, he's basing his statements on the Constitution and what's provided for in there versus other people saying
well, there's no rights for you to vote.
Or draft rights for people.
But I'm saying there's no right for you to vote.
That was the good part of it.
That was the good part.
We didn't want Kimberly voting at all. No voting for Kimberly.
I tend to vote multiple times.
I know you're going to move on very quickly, but Scalia did at some point realize that he wasn't going to win that battle, and he said he would want the states to decide these things independently.
Yeah, so he was a states' rights guy. And by the way, I mean, states' rights after the civil rights movement.
And gay marriage.
But you're exactly right.
All right. Well, Scalia's death instantly reshaped the presidential race, as we've been discussing, and GOP candidates are urging the president to hold off on a nomination.
The president should allow the next president to appoint the justice to the Supreme Court.
If you shift the court's philosophy to the left, you're going to have a devastating impact on the liberties that Anton Scalia believed in.
We need great intellect. We need, I say, absolutely conservative. But I think the real plan for it would be somebody just like Justice Scalia.
You're going to filibuster anyone that President Obama nominates?
Absolutely. This should be a decision for the people. Let the election decide. If the Democrats want to replace this nominee, they need to win the election.
The Democratic candidates argue otherwise.
It is outrageous that Republicans in the Senate and on the campaign trail have already pledged to block any replacement that President Obama nominates. Barack Obama is President of the United States until January 20th, 2017.
I think we want a full contingent on the United States Supreme Court. They are dealing with enormously important issues. The Constitution is pretty clear. President makes the appointment, Senate confirms. Let's get on with that business.
Win the presidential race, and then you can determine it, Greg.
Well, I mean, yeah, maybe in a perfect world, but no, President Obama still can do what he wants. And let's face it, if you were in his situation, you would do the same thing. So Obama will probably nominate, and the Republicans need to deal with it. But this is exactly why you have to win elections. It's why voting emotionally in the eye of the establishment only feeds your adversary. You need somebody who can win, not somebody who can whine. This is why you have to win the White House.
Right, and you have to put it up the right way, which is not a recess appointment, because he's been smacked down on that before on a 9-0 vote when he tried to do a recess appointment, claiming that the Senate wasn't in session, but in fact they say that they were still in session. So, you know, put it up for a fair vote. Let's see what happens. And there's, like as Megan said, a tremendous vetting process that has to go in addition to the hearings.
Yeah, and even if Obama can nominate, the Senate will ultimately decide. And if it ends up being filibustered, like Senator Cruz says, then it's going to be entirely, this whole thing is going to be so politicized. It's really tragic given this man's history and legacy on the Supreme Court. I don't see anybody passing on either side until there's a new electorate. And I agree, let the electorate decide.
It's like, we didn't need, this is like a 3-ring circus that has now gone 4-ring. You know what I mean? It's added a whole nother layer to the next, whatever, 8-9 months.
But here's the thing I don't understand. Wait a minute. You say, let the American people decide. The American people decided twice. Obama's the president. And it's what you said, Greg. So he gets to nominate someone. The Senate has then full its role.
So can Chuck Schumer, can Chuck Schumer come back out then and say that it's okay?
Schumer, you know what, though, honestly, let's be really honest. Schumer did say that, and the Republicans pushed back. You remember that? So there's both sides are being hypocritical with this respect. I think it's really important what Greg and Juan say here. You can't look like the Ted Cruz. We're not. Forget it. We're going to stop this in its tracks. You have to play this right. So if President Obama wants to put up someone that comes from the left but is at least moderately on the left, the appellate court judge in D.C., Srinivasan, right. This guy worked for conservative judges in the past.
And 97 to nothing.
But listen to this.
97 to nothing, America. That was the vote in the Senate to confirm him for the D.C.
You risk this. You put up a filibuster, and everyone in the world says, oh, I'm not going to vote Republican this time. You end up with a Democrat in the White House. You're going to get another Supreme Court justice leaving probably over the next 4 to 8 years, I would guess. And then the most important part. The appellate judge, the appointments to the appellate, right? That comes from at the behest of the president, right? So that's really where where the rubber meets the road. If this isn't banned,
what if he nominates Eric Holder?
Well, that wouldn't work. That would play into Republican hands, because that would be such a political
Get ready for
war.
a lot of green eggs and ham, Fed. Yeah, because they'll filibuster that to the end of time. All right, well, Justice Scalia left an indelible mark on American history, and he will forever be remembered, in my opinion. Sir, you are quite simply irreplaceable.